In 1946, as Britain emerged from war, exhausted and rationed, a former Royal Air Force base in West London opened to civilian traffic. The runway was a strip of military concrete. The terminal was a row of ex-army tents pitched on Hounslow Heath. Passengers checked in, standing on duckboards laid across the mud. The site was chosen because it was flat, available, and conveniently near London. At the time, planners assumed the airport would handle perhaps 60,000 passengers a year. They built it on the edge of the city, surrounded by villages and farmland, with room to grow. The villages were called Harmondsworth, Sipson, and Longford. Nobody worried about them. The future of British aviation was a polite, manageable affair. Since then, Heathrow has accepted a painful truth. The land around it has filled in. The villages have stayed. The motorways have arrived, and the airport surrounded on every side by a city that grew up around it cannot physically expand the way every other major hub on Earth has expanded. In 2025, Heathrow handled 84.5 million passengers, its busiest year in history. But here's what makes no sense. Heathrow has only 2 runways. Paris-Charles de Gaulle has 4. Frankfurt has 4. Madrid has 4. Amsterdam Schiphol has 6. Istanbul operates a simultaneous triple runway system. It has 2 secondary runways. Yet, Heathrow remains Europe's premier hub, generated £3.6 billion in revenue, and supported £200 billion in annual UK trade in 2025. So, how can 2 runways carry the weight of Britain's entire global connectivity? And why can't anyone fix it? To understand why Heathrow is trapped, we need to understand why this airport became indispensable in the first place. Heathrow is not just a London airport, it is the United Kingdom's main long-haul hub. It is the home of British Airways. It supports Virgin Atlantic. It anchors the routes of dozens of foreign flag carriers reaching into North America, Asia, the Middle East, Africa, and Europe. For many international travelers, Heathrow is the airport that represents Britain. The UK can have many airports. It only has one Heathrow. Heathrow is not just where Britain flies from. It is where much of the world reaches Britain. The numbers explain why. In 2025, Heathrow generated revenue of £3.6 billion. It moved 84.5 million passengers. On August 1st of that year, it handled more than 270,000 passengers in a single day. 9 of 12 months set new records. But the hidden engine is cargo. Heathrow is the UK's largest port by value. Pharmaceuticals, electronics, perishables, fashion, and business-critical freight flow through the bellies of long-haul passenger aircraft. Heathrow does not just move people, it moves the goods that justify the flights. This is why airlines fight for slots there. This is why governments treat it as a national economic asset. And this is why the central paradox of British aviation has hardened over decades into something close to permanent. Heathrow is too important to ignore, too full to grow easily, too valuable to move away from, and too politically controversial to expand. Heathrow is not busy because London is huge. It is busy because access is scarce. Airlines cannot simply add flights. The airport is full. A pair of Heathrow slots can be worth tens of millions of dollars. At Heathrow, scarcity is the status quo. This gives Heathrow enormous pricing power. This is why carriers prioritize Heathrow over Gatwick, Stansted, Luton, City, or Southend for premium long-haul flying. British Airways controls around 79% of the airport slots. That dominance is built on scarcity. When an airport is full, the past owns the future. But the scarcity has a cost. New routes from emerging markets in Asia, Africa, and Latin America increasingly cannot find space. UK regional airports lose feeder connections as airlines prioritize higher-yield international flying. competition narrows, fares stay elevated, and the airport's resilience to disruption shrinks towards zero. Heathrow's 2 runways are some of the most intensively used pieces of pavement on Earth. The legal cap of 480,000 air transport movements per year is linked to the planning conditions imposed when Terminal 5 was improved. The airport now operates at roughly 99% of that cap. That number is shocking when set against global peers. Dubai International, which moved 95.2 million passengers in 2025, also has 2 runways. Istanbul Airport, which handled 84.4 million passengers in 2025, just around 40,000 short of Heathrow, has 5 runways. Heathrow has no such headroom. The schedule is full before the day even begins. When something goes wrong, there is almost nothing in reserve. Heathrow does not have a capacity problem because it is unsuccessful. It has a capacity problem because it is too successful for 2 runways. The fragility of this system was exposed on the night of March 20th, 2025 at 11:23 p.m. A fire broke out at the North Hyde electrical substation, 5 kilometers from the airport. A high-voltage bushing on a transformer failed, igniting mineral cooling oil. The fire knocked out power to Heathrow for nearly 24 hours. Terminals went dark. Baggage systems failed. The airport declared a major emergency. More than 1,300 flights were cancelled or diverted, and nearly 300,000 passengers were affected globally. Airlines absorbed costs estimated between £80 million and £100 million. A normal airport hit by an outage uses spare runway slots to clear the backlog. Heathrow has no spare slots. The backlog cascades for days. Heathrow can become more efficient. It cannot efficiently hack its way to a 3rd runway. The airport has grown passenger numbers without adding flights by deploying larger aircraft and squeezing more people through each terminal. Heathrow is growing by squeezing more people through the same runway keyhole, but that path has limits. You can put more passengers on each flight. You cannot endlessly increase movements when you are already at the legal cap. And the legal cap exists to protect the communities living under the flight path. More flights means more noise. More flights means more road and rail pressure. More flights mean more emissions and air quality concerns in one of Europe's most polluted urban regions. Heathrow can optimize the timetable. It cannot optimize away London. The 3rd runway has been debated for decades, proposed, delayed, challenged in court, reviewed by one government, cancelled by another, reworked, repriced, and rejected again. The debate involves airport capacity, climate policy, noise, air quality, local homes, national growth, airline costs, road and rail infrastructure, and raw politics. Every government wants economic growth. Every government also wants to avoid being blamed for environmental damage, bulldozed villages, and higher passenger charges. The 3rd runway is not just an airport project, it is Britain's entire infrastructure dysfunction in runway form. In 2025, Heathrow submitted its most ambitious proposal yet. The total expansion bill came to roughly £49 billion. That breaks down into approximately £21 billion for the 3rd runway itself, £12 billion for a new terminal, and £15 billion to modernize existing infrastructure. The plan could enable passenger capacity to grow from 84 million to 150 million. Heathrow projects the project would add 0.43% to UK GDP by 2050 and create up to 40,000 permanent jobs. A 3rd runway sounds like one piece of infrastructure. At Heathrow, it means rebuilding half the machine. To build a 3,500-meter runway in the available land, Heathrow's master plan requires diverting the M25, London's orbital motorway, and one of the busiest roads in Europe, 130 meters to the west, and placing a section of it inside a new tunnel between junctions 14 and 15. At most airports, a runway crosses grass. At Heathrow, it collides with the M25. The engineering complexity is staggering. The risk of cost overruns is enormous. The potential for crippling national traffic disruption during construction is real. And the M25 problem is just one piece of a project that also requires moving rivers, demolishing villages, rebuilding road junctions, and reconfiguring entire terminal complexes around a fundamentally new airport geometry. This is why the runway is not just an aviation issue. It is a national infrastructure issue. Heathrow says the expansion can be privately funded. No direct taxpayer check, but private financing does not mean free. Heathrow operates under a regulated asset-based model. The UK Civil Aviation Authority sets the maximum charges Heathrow can levy on airlines based on its infrastructure spending and passenger forecasts. Any new investment eventually flows through into landing fees, which flow through into ticket prices. Airlines understand this perfectly. They want more capacity. They do not necessarily want to pay for it. Everyone wants more Heathrow. Nobody wants the invoice. British Airways parent IAG has demanded that the total cost should be capped at £30 billion, not £49 billion. CEO Luis Gallego has been a vocal critic of the budget. Virgin Atlantic's Cornel Costa has called for cheaper alternatives. In early 2026, the CAA rejected Heathrow's proposal to raise average passenger landing fees by 17% to £33.26, capping the increase to just 1% at £28.80. CAA Director Selina Chatter framed the decision as protecting consumers while enabling investment. In practice, it signaled that the regulator would simply not rubber-stamp Heathrow's spending plans. In May 2026, the CAA went further, exploring rules that would allow third parties to build and run parts of Heathrow's future infrastructure. That third-party option already has a name. The Aurora Group, led by hotelier Surinder Arora, has submitted an alternative scheme called Heathrow West. Priced between £19.5 billion and £25 billion, the Aurora plan proposes a shorter 2,800-metre runway that avoids tunnelling the M25, alongside a modular Terminal 6. The CAA has allowed Aurora to recover £4.3 million in early planning costs. Heathrow itself has been permitted to recover up to £320 million. For the first time in decades, Heathrow's monopoly over its own expansion is being seriously challenged. For people outside London, Heathrow expansion sounds like national growth. For people under the flight path, it sounds like another aircraft every minute. The third runway requires the physical erasure of communities. Under the primary proposal, up to 950 residential properties face compulsory purchase and demolition. Heathrow has offered compensation at 125% of the unblighted market value, plus stamp duty, and legal fees for relocation. For some residents, that is meaningful. For others, no check replaces a community. For Britain, Heathrow expansion is a growth strategy. For some local communities, it is the sound of another aircraft every minute. There is more than one obstacle that previous decades did not face. The UK has legally binding climate commitments, including net zero by 2050. Aviation emissions are hard to reduce. Sustainable aviation fuel helps. Aircraft efficiency improves. Carbon pricing tightens. But more flights still mean more emissions. Opponents argue that expanding the UK's single largest source of carbon emissions cannot be reconciled with national climate law. Heathrow's third runway is being proposed in a world that no longer treats flight growth as automatically good. The most common counter-argument is that London has 6 airports and traffic should simply spread. The argument sounds reasonable. It misunderstands how hubs work. Gatwick is strong on leisure, short haul, and some long haul point-to-point. Stansted to Luton are low-cost heavy. London City is runway limited and serves business travel from the financial centre. Southend is far smaller. None of them have Heathrow's transfer network, cargo flows, or premium long-haul base. London has 6 airports, but only one of them is Heathrow. A hub works because flights connect. Long-haul passengers feed short-haul flights. Short-haul flights feed long-haul routes. Marginal long-haul routes only survive because of connecting passengers gathered from across Europe and the UK. You cannot scatter a hub across 6 airports and expect it to behave like one airport. Gatwick can give London more flights. It cannot give Heathrow more connections. Some people argue Britain should build a new mega airport elsewhere, perhaps in the Thames estuary. The idea returns every decade. It never survives contact with reality. Heathrow already has terminals, rail links, the Elizabeth Line, cargo infrastructure, airline bases, maintenance facilities, hotels, offices, and a workforce of tens of thousands. British Airways' entire long-haul network is built around Heathrow. Airlines hold slot portfolios valued in the billions. Moving the UK's main hub would be a national mega-project, larger than expansion itself. Heathrow is too connected to grow easily, but too embedded to replace. Despite everything, the political wind has shifted. In January 2025, Chancellor Rachel Reeves confirmed government backing for expansion as a catalyst for British growth. Transport Minister Heidi Alexander invited proposals for an operational runway by 2035. Heathrow has committed funding to develop the planning application. The aim is to secure a development consent order, the legal authorization required for nationally significant infrastructure, by 2029. First flights from a third runway are targeted around 2035. The economic argument remains powerful. Supporters argue expansion would increase capacity, improve resilience, add routes, support trade, and strengthen the UK's global position. The third runway keeps returning because the underlying problem never went away. But the obstacles remain enormous. Planning approval, judicial reviews, environmental tests, climate politics, air quality compliance, local opposition, financing disputes, airline charge battles, the M25 tunnel, years of construction disruption. Even if approved in 2029, delivery would take into the mid-2030s. Costs could escalate, designs could be challenged, governments could change. Heathrow's third runway is always close enough to seem possible, and complicated enough to remain unreal. If Heathrow remains a two-runway airport, the consequences are clear. Slots stay scarce, airlines' access remains limited, fares stay elevated. British Airways' dominance remains protected by the very scarcity it benefits from. Rival hubs in Europe absorb the traffic London cannot fit. UK regional airports struggle to maintain domestic connections into the hub as airlines prioritise higher-yield international routes. Heathrow will continue to be successful. It will simply become more premium, more expensive, and more exclusive. A stuck Heathrow does not become irrelevant, it becomes more elite. Heathrow is stuck because every solution creates a different problem. Expand the airport and you gain capacity but accept noise, emissions, cost, and the demolition of villages. Refuse expansion and you preserve communities but constrain the UK's main global gateway. Build elsewhere and you face disruption and the impossible task of moving an entire aviation ecosystem. Use other London airports and you add flights, but not the hub connectivity that makes Heathrow what it is. In 1946, planners pitched tents on Hounslow Heath and built a runway because there was empty space and a country desperate for global connection. The airport grew because it had to. 8 decades later, Heathrow represents the complete opposite of that founding moment. Not empty land, but a saturated city. Not a desperate need for any connection, but a sophisticated dependency on the specific connections only this airport provides. Not a future to be built, but a present that cannot be undone. When those first passengers theoretically board a flight from a third runway sometime in the 2030s, they will complete a debate that took most of a century to resolve. 2 runways, a £49 billion bill, a motorway that has to be tunneled, houses that have to be demolished, and the awkward truth that the most important airport in Britain is also the hardest to change. Britain's most important airport is not failing, it is trapped inside its own importance. The question isn't whether Heathrow needs a third runway, it's whether the rest of the country is really paying attention to what happens if it never gets one.